Live now.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning, everybody. Both to Adrian and to Adam and to everybody else who's watching us live and those that watch us retrospectively. Welcome to another webinar run by myself and by Adrian Clark and Adam Davis, otherwise known as the Good, the Bad and the Ugly. I'm not going to say which is which. Make your own mind up. Today's webinar, well, I think this is going to be a good one, guys. 10 things your field engineer software should do.
Yep.
I think the reason we chose this topic, and correct me if I'm wrong, is because, look, when we go out and we talk to people in the various industries, service-led industries broadly that we talk to, 90% of the conversations are about engineers, managing engineers, how to get more out of engineers, what could engineers be doing better, how can we support them better. Most of the conversations, to be fair, are around that topic, are they not?
Yeah, no, it's all about efficiency with engineers, really.
Great. Right, well, let's crack on then. The scope for today really is, we'll aim to make it last about 30 minutes or so. We'll run through a few points that are going to set this up. And then, Adam, I believe you're going to do a bit of a demo for us, so we can see how some of these challenges that we're going to talk about and the things that the field engineer software should do, we're going to illustrate those and talk about some of the benefits associated with having them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sounds good with me. Should we crack on then?
Yeah.
So this is a PowerPoint we've had made, and the first slide, which I think is an important part to talk about, isn't so much what it does. It's why implement systems like this for your engineers.
Yeah, why bother in the first place?
Yeah, essentially. Yeah, what makes it worth it, really?
It's an interesting point, that, because when we came up with the idea of the webinar, we thought we'll do it on engineer software and the things it should do. It was, we got about halfway through that, and then someone else pointed out, they're just like, well, why would they even, before you even get to that point, why bother in the first place? And actually, it is important because we do still have them conversations, don't we? People do. There are it's not that people are using that everyone is using some kind of mobile software. It's actually a lot of people not using it at all.
Yeah, well, actually, what I always find is a lot of people use it in their own personal lives, but in the work life, they might not be using it whatsoever.
Yeah. Is it fair to say that, although there are many reasons, the predominant reason is there's, for various reasons, there is resistance, which I guess is like stating the obvious, but is it fair to say that resistance is commonly about how they feel their engineers are going to feel about it?
Yeah, will the engineers have that fear of change that a lot of people get in various times, and will there be any resistance from their engineers, really? And I think half the problem is, or half the task is, ensuring your engineers understand why the company are doing it, which tends to leave to them adopting it or being a bit more welcome to the solution, really.
Yeah, some of the things that I commonly hear, and you might have others, this idea of Big Brother, as we call it. So people at maybe at a management level or an operational level worry that the engineers are going to consider it some kind of, they're going to find it offensive because they think they're being tracked, and that means they don't trust them, and that breaks down the relationship between the back office and the engineers. That's quite a common bit of feedback that we get, illustrating that resistance, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it comes from both sides, from the office side and the engineers. I always find the office staff don't want to feel like they are acting as that Big Brother sort of role, and at the same time, engineers just don't want to be tracked. But as you can see from these points on here, in reality, a lot of it, I guess, from our side, from our solution, isn't around tracking engineers, their actual location. It's all around, as you can see, these 6 points, just getting the information to the office quicker, reducing admin, improving your communication with customers. It's not, the main goal isn't tracking every minute or every step of the engineer.
Yeah, so I think in my experience, having sat in front of I don't know how many customers over the years, it's a concern of the management team that doesn't actually transpire in the end. Because when you actually explain to the engineers what the system's for and how it's going to improve their working day, they're pretty much always on board with it.
Yeah, what I was going to say is, in the interest of speeding it up, because we could talk about it for hours on its own. The reality is there are some, what you could argue, are justifiable concerns around fear of being tracked, that engineers might leave, that there might be a problem with adoption. There's the cost issue, like, I'm going to spend money on it. Is it going to deliver a return on that investment for me? I think we could probably have a separate webinar on that topic specifically, but what we're saying is, in the hundreds, if not thousands of cases that have preceded this webinar, the answer is always yes. It's always, people come into it with a degree of fear and then wonder why they ever waited so long. That's fair to say, isn't it?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So just to broadly cover these, some of the high level benefits: live information, historical data, and we'll talk about the benefits of these, so we're not just skipping over them. Yeah. Compliance, audit trail, which basically means you have a record of who's done what and when they did it. There's a reason that it improves first time fix rates, which we'll get into in a second when we go on to the following slides. Obviously reduces the administrative burden, because it tends to be something that they update on a progressive basis as they go, rather than saying it up till the end. And also clearly improves communication with customers, because you've got better quality data. And Aid, when we were talking about this a couple of days ago on that point, I remember you making a really good point, which is worth illustrating, I guess, which is the reason that the data that comes out is better is because it's being captured. The data that ultimately ends up being reported to your customer is majority of the times originated at the coalface, I think was the way that you described it, by the engineer himself or herself.
I would guess about 90% of it comes from the coalface. You know, it's what jobs are they doing, when, what time, what parts did they use, what did they do, what was the problem. All of that critical business information comes from the engineer, and traditionally is written on a piece of paper, with all the sort of issues that come along with that. So to have that information put in at the coalface in real time, but with some process controls, meaning that not only is the information captured in real time, but it's accurate information, and the information you need in order to report accurately is ultimately captured at that place and time. That's absolutely pivotal to your reporting at the back end, because if we all know the old adage, crap in, crap out. So it's really important.
I'm not sure that was the old adage, but it's something like that. Let's move on.
Okay, so what we've got next is we've actually listed 10 things, as we had that discussion earlier on this week about what your engineer software should do. We've actually got to 11.
Okay, so let's preface this by saying the eagle-eyed among our viewers will notice that actually there's 11. Yeah. But the marketing department weren't convinced that 11 things your engineer software should do had quite the same ring to it.
Yeah, you never really have a top 11, do you?
No, and there was some that we wanted to put in that we left out, so maybe we'll get around talking about those as well. So go on then, let's look at the first. Let's go.
So what I'll do is we'll go through each point, and then after we've gone through each point, I'll go through the demonstration, show everyone how it actually works. I think first and foremost, just go through and look at the points. So the first one, 10 things your engineer software should do, is work offline or on any device.
So just to illustrate what we've got on the left-hand side with the convenient thumbs up is the feature, if you like, and on the right-hand side of the thumbs down is the consequence maybe of your software not doing that.
Yeah.
So this one seems relatively self-explanatory. If it's not working offline, and it's important to say that the reason that that's at number one is because I'm not sure whether these are in order or not, but I think that would be number one, simply because when you're moving around, despite the fact that we see lots of adverts from mobile phone networks telling us how great their coverage is, it is still quite common, particularly in the environments that our customers are working in, that they don't have a signal. And actually, all of the benefits associated with it, which come in all of the other points after it, the other 10, they're all negated if the engineer is in a situation where he doesn't have access, he doesn't have connectivity, and that means he doesn't have access to the software.
Yeah. And obviously, if a lot of work's being done in industrial areas, or commonly in warehouses, it's a big Faraday cage. It's really hard to get a signal. And the company that you're doing the work for they may not want to have you on their Wi-Fi. So, it can cause real problems.
Yeah, well, let's face it, if it doesn't work offline, it just massively reduces the business case of implementing any solutions like this.
If it doesn't work offline, it doesn't work. Frankly.
Yeah, it's just a way of collecting data and doing.
Okay, we've got another 10 to go, so let's crack on.
Okay, next one is ensuring the engineers can access job equipment, and stock history. So what we mean by that is having the ability to look back on previous work, previous stock items used, or any sort of information, any sort of work carried out on that site before they've got there.
And that's important because this type of stuff impacts first-time fix rates. We know that from talking to people. We know they tell us it all the time that if an engineer turns up on site and could have access to what's happened previously, that does impact first-time fix rates, because if they identify a recurring issue or an issue that's been resolved by a different engineer at some point in the past, then by speaking to that engineer, being able to pick up the phone and say, hey, I'm on this job, on this asset with this issue, how did you sort it out? That not only improves the first time fix rate, but it cuts down the time it takes to resolve the problem, which is a benefit to you. Hey, I'm on this job, on this asset, because it's more efficient, and it's also beneficial to the customer because the downtime is lower.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's all on there. So next point is raising jobs and job quotes in the field. So this is all around just trying to increase your revenue as much as you can, or maximizing your revenue is probably the best way of putting it. So this relates to the ability of allowing your engineers to pick up those jobs while they're on site. You may have been asked to do while they're there. Typically, can you fix this while you're here? Could you look at servicing this machine while you're here? It may not have been raised at the point of the call when they first contacted the company. However, they're giving the engineers the ability to log that call and then they'll be charged for it later on down the line. Really helps you not miss that chargeable revenue, basically.
Yeah, specifically with quotes, that's important, I think, because again, people tell us all the time that they will get asked about work that is inevitably chargeable. Engineers will, and if that line of communication back to the office about that quote request isn't clear, those opportunities often get missed. So you're literally leaving money on the table.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Good.
Next is accessing any sort of mobile forms, service sheets or risk assessments from the field, and basically ensuring that you're following an auditable process and you're compliant, essentially. So what that could mean is, obviously, it differs for a lot of different industries. They may have service check sheets, LOLAs for examinations, F-gas service check sheets. There's a whole range of check sheets you can incorporate in your solution depending on what industry you are.
This came up the other day, actually. The specific example was risk assessments. Yeah. And somebody was saying that they have a generic risk assessment that the engineer fills in every time they arrive on site. But actually, in some places they go to, some of their customer sites, they'll have their own risk assessment. And actually, if the engineer doesn't have that, there isn't always somebody there on site from your customer side to enforce that. So it's a responsibility of the engineer. They don't have the right risk assessment, then you don't have that audit process historically. If they ever ask you for it, or if something happens or something goes wrong, did you complete the risk assessment that we asked you to do, that is part of our agreement or contract with you? Yeah. Well, no, we didn't. Or yes, we did. Well, can I have a copy of it? Well, I don't know where it is because it's down the back of the passenger seat in one of the engineers' vans, and you've lost it. Yeah, no, exactly. And then you'll also have the time it was completed as well, which will be important part of that process.
It's also quite useful for when companies do 24/7, so they don't rely on somebody in the office to be able to provide them with the right sheet at the right time. No matter what job the engineer gets called out to do at whatever time of day, they have access to every possible form that they could need, which is, is quite important. Well,
if you're not digitizing those forms, I mean, we speak to some people and they go, oh, yeah, it's fine because we've only got like 2 or 3 check sheets. But we speak to a lot of customers who have 50, 60, even over 100. Oh, yeah. It's like, if they're paper-based, what chance have you got of getting that right all of the time? And imagine having to carry them around or make sure you're issuing the right paper sheet to somebody.
Well, not even that, just storing them and the cost of paper alone.
Well, there's another point there as well, actually. Sometimes they don't have that many sheets because it's not practical to have 100 different, versions of a sheet in a van for any potential scenario that the engineer could come across. So what tends to happen is they consolidate a lot of what they need into less forms. And then the problem with that is the engineers are always filling in the right information for the right type of job, or it can be confusing. or you just end up with job sheets that are a mess and they're no good for the customer either. So the benefit of having them digitized is you get the right form with the right information. It can guide you as to what to put in, and it can make sure that you capture the data that you need to capture in order to have good reporting.
We're going to have to skip through these a bit quicker, gentlemen.
The next one is stock part requests and good receiving. So this links back to slightly as well as the first time fix rates, but it's also around actually managing your stock parts and ensuring you've got good visibility of where they are.
Yeah, so stock part requests is an engineer requires a part for a job. Firstly, you need to be able to see, are there any stock? Is there any of that stock somewhere else? But also quite often people will order parts on the back of the request, send them directly to sites, but there's no process to confirm that it arrived. So in the office, in the back office, if you're receiving parts, there is normally a goods receiving process. If you deliver them directly to site or to an engineer's, a pickup point or an engineer's home or something like that, you don't have that auditable process. Whereas if you have that as part of the mobile software, then we're staying tight on that, aren't we?
Yeah, no, exactly. I think I'm sort of going through these a bit quicker now, like I said. But the next one is it's quite a simple one, really, but taking images and annotating them to really showing the proof of work that's been completed. Just having that ability to then look back on the job and see, well, what work was carried out. The engineer could circle it and say, I did this. Or equally, it could be the case of they've got to site and something's been damaged before they've got there.
As they say, a picture paints 1,000 words.
Exactly.
And what it does do is, by being able to create an image of whatever the problem was, put that onto the job sheet and send it to the customer, it actually reduces the amount of occasions that they get questions about the work, or people, their end customer queries, or was that really our fault? Did we really break it? Was it, so that's hugely helpful in things like customer damage scenarios, I think. Okay.
So the remaining 5 on another slide, so very quickly again. So real-time data syncs back to the office. So this is an important one. It kind of links back to the offline one originally, the first point, but it gives the office the visibility of what's actually going on in sort of live time. So if you do get any queries from customers, they can answer them pretty much straight away without having to wait a week, or let's say how long it takes the engineer to report back with a job sheet. There's 1,000 things that this impacts on. I mean, scheduling a job is real-time data. It's like, where is that? An urgent job comes in some industries, they might call it a VOR or something like that. An urgent job arrives. You've got an SLA to actually be on site within a certain time. Just being able to see, where is everybody and what are they doing? What jobs are they working on? Who's on an urgent job already? Who isn't? Who is potentially coming to the end of their job? Who is, geographically, who is the closest? That's a massive impact on making those decisions.
Stock availability is a good one as well. So if you know exactly what stock you got where in real time, which is quite important.
Yeah. Well, that links on to the next point quite nicely, Ed.
Good segue.
Yeah, well, we touched on that and a couple of the other ones, a few stock in other locations, and that is simply because, again, we hear it all the time. They buy stock that they already have because they didn't know it was there. So it might be in another location. They didn't know it was there. The location they're in doesn't have any, so they buy more. And it's ridiculous because they're not only are they eating up cash flow and spending money that they don't need to, but quite often those parts. So then you've got parts that are not getting used, that are constantly aging because they're never coming out of the location because they keep buying new ones. It's not uncommon for parts to expire.
Yeah. Or be a high value and have no idea where they are.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Capturing timesheets automatically. So it's obviously preventing engineers having to manually complete them at the end of each day or end of each week, or however often they do them. Now, the main point about this one is actually just by nature of using a solution like this, it's automatically building the timesheets up in the background without the engineer really having to do much, because there's always that timestamp on when they've completed work, when they've travelled, and that kind of thing. So it negates any need to even probably think about a timesheet.
Yeah, 100%. It's another admin process that takes a huge amount of time, both for the engineer and for the back office. And if you can calculate that as a consequence of running the mobile solution, it's a win-win for both sides.
Well, how many times have we heard engineers filling out timesheets at the end of the week, which is probably common practice, end of each week, but then you rely on your memory to get the timing right.
Yeah, look, also with admin generally, not just for engineers, but in this context, engineers, most of the time they're doing it in their working day. They don't do it. They don't do it on a Saturday while they're sat at home watching, on deck Saturday night takeaway. They're doing it. You're paying them to do that admin.
Yeah, no, exactly. So it's time where they can be spent doing other things, really.
Yeah.
Next one is accesses other information such as manuals and site-related documents. So this could be anything from, let's say, a manual for a piece of equipment, could use like a fork truck as an example, or it could be wiring diagrams or any sort of instructions related to a particular make and model of an asset. You can allow the engineers to have them on hand instantly on his device, which inevitably helps increase efficiency and first-time fix rates because they're not going back and forth to site figuring out what they need. They're not ringing up the office, asking certain questions, maybe to a service manager, perhaps. All the information they need around the asset, documentation-wise, should be there within their device.
I think that's the big one, Ed. I think 20 years ago, people would take the manuals with them. And it wouldn't be uncommon to see manuals in the back of an engineer's van. I think it's less prevalent now, and they are more reliant on, if they don't know something, they'll ring somebody else up. And that's taking up two people's time. So being able to have a digital electronic copy of the manual to be able to review easily, again, it's a huge time saver.
Yeah, the important thing is that the manuals are always up to date then.
Yeah. No, exactly. And then the last point is QR and barcode scanning. Now, I've noticed over the last couple of years, this is becoming a lot more of a bigger requirement, really. Companies are assets sort of barcoding or kind of sticking QR codes or certain pieces of equipment out on site so that when engineers get there, it's easy to identify. If you've got that logged in the system, when their engineers get to site, they don't have to faff around looking around for the right asset. They can do a quick barcode scan and identify assets almost instantly.
I think, you hit the nail on the head. I think historically it's not been uncommon for people to barcode parts or bin locations and stuff like that. That's there's a lot of people not using that technology, but it's been around for a long time.
Yeah.
I think where it comes into its own is if you've got a site where, as a company, you've got lots of assets, or whatever they happen to be in your industry. You could have lots of assets and lots of jobs. There might be, we have customers that might have 50 assets on a site, and they might be trying to do some kind of PM schedule, doing the PM jobs. It's like how they spend so much time trying to associate the right job with the right asset. Yeah, if you can barcode the asset, go up to it, scan it, and it'll tell you straight away, do I have a job on my device for this asset?
Exactly.
And if it is, which one is it?
Yeah, is there any other work needed?
Exactly. Again, it's just that convenience. Again, it helps the engineer. It gives them better quality information, helps them be more efficient. And as a consequence, back office get a better view of it and your customer gets a better experience. Again, it's a win-win. All right.
So what I'll do now is I think I'll just demonstrate all these points. I'll go through a process in the device, and during that process, we'll cover most of these points.
I was going to say, if you point them out one by one, then we're going to lose everybody because we'll be here for the next 3 hours. So I think, just give us a flavour of your mobile software demonstration, and we will naturally come across those points as we go through it.
Yeah. So can you all see that? Just to make sure you can see my device.
Yeah, I can.
Cool. Yeah. So I'm using a Samsung tab here to do demonstrations. So it's quite a big device, really. However, a lot of our clients pick and choose what they want to use. It could be Android or iOS. So they could use a small phone if their engineers have small smartphones, or equally, if you want a big tablet because you're a bit blind like me, you can see the text a lot bigger sort of size. So it's entirely up to the users how they want to use this software. But this is what you see when you log in. So basically, I've got a job list. I can filter, I can do searches by service or repair, but I've just got a big list of jobs. The color coded based on type of work. Is it a service? Is it chargeable? So the engineer can see that. But this is what they're welcome with straight away. Now, Going back to the first point, one of the last point we spoke about barcoding, the really useful part of that process is this part of the software when you log in. So let's say we've got to a site, a large site, and you know who's work on a certain asset, and you found it, but you want to find a job in your list, this big long list. We have a barcoding functionality here. So if I hit that, and I just use this barcode I found in the drawer, it'll identify it, and it will now pull up that asset that we've now looked, say we're on site, we found the asset, we found the barcode, it's pulled up this combi lift, which is what we've identified. And from there, we can view tasks, we can raise a service job, and we can look at job history, parts history, and view relevant documents, which I'll go into in a moment.
See, that's handy, because even if what you're saying is, even if you don't have a job open for it, you could use the identifier to create a job.
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. So what it has shown me though is I've got 3 tasks on that job list we looked at a minute ago. I've got 3 tasks on there which relate to this asset that have been issued to me. So if I hit view tasks, it actually filters them now from that job list, and we can see in here. So
it's just so much quicker, isn't it, and much more efficient.
Yeah, exactly. And if you've got if you do a lot of jobs a day or a lot of jobs over the week, and you've been issued that week's worth of jobs by the office to you, rather than scroll through this list, it can just brings up and highlights those we've got here, 3 jobs for that asset. So what I'll do now is we'll click into one. So if we look at this one down here, we can see we've got a service for it. It's a combi lift, side loader forklift, and it's a major service, and it's incomplete. So if I click into this job, there's quite a bit of information to take in. So I'll just sort of go through each tab, and we'll talk about it like that. So initially, you log into the job, and you'll notice we have traveling to job, working on job at the top. Now, this relates back to timesheets. Now, our engineer device is what we call activity-based, or it logs engineers' time by activity, really. So let's say the start of the day, I've selected that I'm going to this job, and I hit traveling to job. That will now put a timestamp on my timesheet that at 9:56 today, I started traveling to this site. I can't, once I click into these, I can't actually amend any detail until I select working on job. So that's to make sure you don't forget to hit working on job.
Got you.
So let's say now I've got to this site, I hit working on job, and straight away it's put up a risk assessment.
Yeah, and is that just a generic risk assessment, or?
This is one that's this isn't one of our generic ones in the system. However, they can be specific to customer sites. So if you've got a site you've agreed with a customer that we're going to do a certain check sheet, you can design it yourself in the system and ensure that every time the engineer gets to that site or that job, he has a specific check sheet to carry out.
Yeah.
So I just very quickly hit yes and no on all these answers and hit save. I'm now in the job. My activity in the back right-hand corner is now working on job. So you know that's where the engineer is, and that's his timestamp and his timesheet. You've got the usual details, so customer details, where we're working on, who's the site contact. We have the reason for the call, so we know it's a service, it's a chargeable service. Some of this detail can be amended by the engineer if you want them to. Again, it's up to you, it's up to our customers if they allow the engineers the ability to do that or not really. And then with that as well, we have other helpful tools here, I guess, to show, is it shared with any other engineers? Are there any previous site photos? I mean, importantly, because it's a service, what standard service items do we need?
So if an engineer is before he goes on site, if he reviews the jobs that he's got on his list, he can clearly see here, you know, what parts does he need to fulfill one of the services. So a major service, clearly he's going to need those parts, and as you can see there, he doesn't have them.
Exactly. And with that as well, also the bottom section, related items, is just like sort of generic items you probably will use for that item. So if it's any sort of job, not just a service, show you related items that are specific to that make and model, and you can ensure that your engineers have got the van stock for when they get to the site. And
again, what that improves is first time fix, doesn't it?
Yeah, so you're not doing repeat visits.
Yeah, so it makes sure that the job's fixed first time and the customer's happy. It saves them when to go on site. If they don't have the parts to do the job, there's one or two things that's going to happen. Either they have to go back another day and order the parts, or they still have to go off site and get those parts and then come back. So there's more time, there's more effort. You know, he's not getting more jobs done. So it improves the first time fix, it improves efficiency, and it means that you get more jobs done in a day, really, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And then we have a tab structure at the top here. So moving through, I'll go into equipment. We're now looking at the asset we're fixing. So that's come from what I barcode scanned originally. So you can see a bit of information around that. But then importantly here, we have a few tools. So we have one, you can change the equipment. If the assets, say the job's been raised against the wrong piece of equipment originally from the office.
Yeah, that happens quite a lot, I think, doesn't it, for some people. Which
is important because the history then goes against the correct asset.
Yeah.
View documents. So if I hit this, we can view, I say manuals as an example that are already assigned to that asset. So it goes back to the conversation we were having originally around having manuals in the vans.
Yeah.
We'll pull that up. Let's go back again. We also have job history, which is an important one. So if I hit job history, we can look back at all the jobs associated with this piece of equipment. Now, it's only on this equipment because we're in a job against this equipment. You can equally, on the homepage of the app, you can do it for any job.
Yeah. What I like about this is the fact that you can review hire contracts, PM contracts, purchase orders, but importantly parts, because if you want to know how often a particular part's been changed, it saves you going through all of the different jobs to try and find a job with a part on it. You can clearly see that part was added at this particular point in time.
Exactly. And then with that, you can go into detail. So this was a job that was carried out only yesterday. Work done note, so a fault repairs and service complete. Well, if I hit that, it's going to show us an image, which is my mouse. So it shows that you can attach work done notes or photos of work done essentially there onto the old jobs. And then with that, so part used, labour time, and also the check sheet that was carried out on that job. So it's pulling through any service check sheet. So if you do a new service check sheet, you can look back at the previous ones, his previous results, which we can see here. So this is
fantastic because engineers would never normally be able to view that level of detail, would they?
No, you can see it all, zoom in if you need to. And it's got a check sheet, which you can see on this one. Everything was okay, so it passed. There was no faults. But if there were any faults,
if you were doing an annual service, you could look at the last annual service, couldn't you? You could
exactly. You can see who carried it out and when, and there's a signature at the bottom. So all that information is in there just by looking at job history. So remember, we've not really even started the job yet. We've not added any parts or labour on here. All we've done is just look at the information that's available to us. And then lastly, there's a few other tools. Part history is very similar to job history, just shows the parts that are used. You can edit or add new equipment. So that could be a case of, well, we've got to the site and there's a new asset here we didn't know about. Let's add it into the database. And that'll then go into the office system. Yeah,
so essentially you can asset capture on new sites if you wanted to.
Yeah, like a survey really, isn't it?
I think it's worth actually mentioning though, that is not without some controls, which is again, comes back to my point earlier about crap in, crap out. The last thing you want to do is allow anybody to put anything into the system which ends up as an asset in the back end system, because you'll have misspellings and all sorts of different weird and wonderful things in there. In this particular system, it's controlled. The make of the model must be in there, and there's a profile that sits behind that with a lot of the standard information. So essentially all the engineer is doing really is putting in things like serial numbers and that sort of thing, isn't it?
Would things like that be on a configuration as well? So could you have it that they just don't have the ability to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because it's not really a one.
It's important to say, because some people would look at that and go, absolutely 100% not letting anyone do that.
Yeah, or allow senior engineers perhaps to do it, and not everyone.
Understood.
So going into the next one, TCC, that stands for Test, Calibrations and Certificates. It's essentially pulling up any service check sheets that need to be carried out.
So this is any document that may need to be carried out as part of the job.
Yeah. So from a compliance perspective, any service check sheet, anything like that, any information you need to gather, this is where it would show. Now, straight away, it's brought up a check sheet, electric counterbalance, preventive maintenance check sheet, because the system, we've set against the system that this particular make and model, as it's a service job, this check sheet needs to be carried out.
So this is the check sheet that needs to be done for this job.
Yeah.
And when the job is created through a combination of the asset and the type of service that you're doing, it knows which sheet to send with the job.
Exactly. Now, this one here, though, is a very basic one in the solution. So this is just one where we've got pass and fails as answers. So the engineer will go through pass, fail, and advisories. So this is quite a simple one. However, we do have, if I just close off this one and hit save on that, we do have more complex ones. So the engineer actually, once he's completed that one, he can go into here and add any more if he needs to. So if I hit plus, we can see we've got a few other ones in here. And I could show them all, because at the moment it's only showing ones that are related to this type of asset. If I hit show all, it'll pull up all the service check sheets in the system. So when we spoke about that earlier, engineers carrying, you could have loads of documents, 30, 40, 50 check sheets. They can just search for them all in here.
Yeah, that's really quite useful, that.
I'm going to pull this one up, just as another example. So this one is, like I say, it's a lot more detailed than the previous one I've just shown you. So we have drop downs first and foremost for the reason for this service, which is a thorough examination in the fork truck world. So if I hit that, as a drop down, and then we have some sections of this check sheet. We can see here load handling's got 6 sections incomplete. If I hit into that, again, like in the previous check sheet, we have pass and fails in the way of OK and false. Hit OK, that goes down to 5.
It's worth mentioning as well that some of these are mandatory fields, so you can't complete the job until you complete the test, and you can't complete the test until you capture the information that the business deems important.
Well, added to that point, in the next part, I say this one, if I say there's a fault, well, I've got to list what the fault is.
Yeah, and that goes back to making sure that, you know, or proving that all the important, or the majority of the important data is captured with the engineers in the field.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
if it's a good quality data, you get good quality reporting at the end of the day.
Well, you see that now. So put fault, I've entered not working, you've got to put a time frame. So that's got to be added in. So you can do that, and you just go through and tick them off, basically. You'll notice now this section has 3 incomplete, but 1 fault.
Yeah.
And there's other type of data you can take as well. So we've got measurements here as an example, percentages and dimensions. So you can basically, from an end user perspective in the office, you can configure any document to ensure that your engineers are capturing the right data. And
there's no long. What we're saying is, the way things are now, the way the system is now structured, to the advancements, there is now no situation or eventuality that we can't cater for in the creation of these sheets.
Exactly.
And it's important to say, it's another webinar, but it's important to say that our customer creates these sheets. They don't have to come to us cap in hand and say, can you create these sheets for me? They do it themselves in the back office, don't they?
Exactly.
And it's an easy drag and drop sort of function as well. And it also gives you the ability to preview and interact with the sheet before you push it out to the engineers.
Yeah,
just to make sure that it works properly.
So, well, next we'll talk about parts. So we've only done a check sheet so far, I think, about it. We're going to parts now, and you've got there's a few tools in here to use. Firstly, I can hit this plus button here and add stock items on. Now, straight away, you've got a big list of these stock items that are actually on my van. However, I have the ability to view what's on the branch as well. So notice the quantities change. So that's showing me what's actually in the depot available to me. So if I didn't have the stock in, I could do a request and take some stock from the branch. Now, if you've got a lot of stock on your van, you might want to search all this detail here or scroll through. But again, going back to barcoding, we have a barcode functionality where I can scan another barcode that I've got here. Let's do it the other way. And it's now pulled up an oil filter. As you can see here in the background, it's got oil filter. It's pulled it up. How many do we want to add? So I'll add one on. And that's now on the job. So I've taken the stock off the van, barcode scanned it, and it's added it into the parts.
Great.
So pretty simple. And from that, you can also do parts requests as well if you wanted to, if you had no stock in, but we'll cover that in a minute. Go into labour. This goes back to timesheets. So at 9:56, I travelled to the job for a minute till 9:57. That'll be on the timesheet now. I've worked this job for 11 minutes now. So once I complete this job, it'll timestamp it from 9:57 till whenever I finish it, and that'll be on my timesheet.
So it's just naturally accruing in the background, isn't it?
Exactly. Then finally, I go to work done, and here's where you can enter in the sort of work done notes. So finished job, service complete. That'll go on the job sheet, and with that, I can actually add any documents on my device, add any photos from a library, or take a photo.
Okay.
So I'll just skip the
I
file.
think it's quite important because
If
if you,
I had that on, there's my work done on my laptop. And then with that, I've taken it the wrong way. But with that, you can actually then annotate it. So you can highlight it, stamp it, or just draw on it and say, here is the work I carried out.
Yeah. Here is the fault.
Yeah. Or
here is the damage. Here is the bit here's the part that I've refitted.
Yeah. So I've stamped number 1 there, and you can put customer damage in there as an example. So there's a few ways of doing it, and that then goes to the client, and you've got it in the office, and your client can see that. So you're all on the sort of same page. So if you have to
add private or add public is determining that, isn't it? Do you want only the back office to see it, or do you want the back office and the customer to see it?
It's exactly that, yeah. So if I add as public, the customers will then see that as well. With
so that's going to end up on the job sheet.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that'll happen in real time as well. If you've got internet connectivity, within, I don't know, a couple of seconds, that's back on the job, as are any parts, any notes, or anything else.
Exactly.
Perfect.
If I then go to complete, and I'll get the ability to select, well, was this a first time fix? That's from reporting purposes. Again, this is configuration setting. So if you want to report on first time fix, then great, because you can tick this and it'll report on that.
There are other things that you can have there as well, such as the equipment safe to use, is it vehicle off road, and also you can have diagnostic reports as well. So, root cause analysis and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And then one here is equipment hours. So this particular asset has running hours. So if you wanted to update the meter on that, you can do, like I say, it's at 40,000 hours now.
And that might trigger a service as well, actually.
Exactly. Now, before I complete a task, you do have the ability to complete and raise a new task. So that's the engineer saying, I finished the task that was raised. However, they've asked me to do something else.
Yeah, there's remedial work associated with it.
So I can do that, and that will then become another task to the job, which you can then decide whether to charge for it or not. But even if you don't charge for it, at least you've got record of it.
Yeah, understood.
If I hit complete task, it gives me a summary of what we've just completed. Works in 14 minutes. I booked 1 part on.
I guess that's a handy summary to present to the customer before they sign it off.
Yeah, it's just to say, here's what I've done. So you show them it, and then you say, right, can you please sign now, Mr. John Smith? So John signs like a 5-year-old, and then you can give him the ability to sort of give satisfactory reports back.
Yeah.
Were you happy with the engineer? And if you say poor, the office get notified on that, but naturally I'm a pretty good engineer, so it was excellent. And then the engineer signs as well. And that's the job complete. But importantly, before I complete that job, I've got to select the next activity. And that then starts the timesheet rolling again. So the engineer shouldn't forget his activities at any point.
Yes, you're saying what? So it's saying you finished that job, brilliant. What are you doing now?
Yeah, exactly.
Even if it's you doing nothing.
Yeah, exactly. So hit break, it removes the job. So there's nowhere to be charged. There's nowhere to charge that time. But if I hit traveling to job, I've then got to select which job I'm traveling to out of my job list.
Perfect.
So it'll then start accruing travel time to whatever job it is. So if I say Asda, hit select, I'm now in this next Asda job.
Yeah, you see at the bottom right.
Yeah.
And also importantly, it'll geo tag that event, so you'll know where they were when that happened.
Exactly. So that's a job process complete. But just to finish off, because I'm just conscious of time now, we have been going on for quite a bit. We have other features in here as well. So the engineer, if you want them to, can request holiday or put in sick leave. Again, this is configuration settings. Some of our customers use, some don't. Raise new call is essentially raising a new job. So that's like what I spoke about earlier. If you're on site and someone's asked you to raise a job, great, raise it in there.
I was also thinking that'd be handy for working out of hours. So if people's cover, if you cover in, out of hours, bank holidays, overnight, whatever, and there's no one in the office to issue the job to you, then quite often people will divert the service call phone to the on-call engineers. They just receive a call, log onto the software, raise the job.
Exactly. They search for a site, search for equipment, and there they are, raising it. With that as well, we also have quote requests, which is very similar to raising a new job. You're just taking information for a quote. However, it's not sending the quote. It's going to send a notification back to the office to say, here's a request for a quote, here's the information, and the office can deal with it accordingly.
what's pretty powerful about that, because we talked about it earlier, is it creates like a draft quote in the back office system, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So there isn't even the duplication of inputting the data. So the engineer says, right, I've spoken to my guy on site. They need this, and this, and I think we're going to need this, and it'll take this long. Then that quote effectively becomes a quote in your quoting system in our back office solution as a draft, which you can go and edit and update and change anything that you think might be incorrect.
Exactly. All you do is select the asset they're fixing if you want to, select the parts they're adding, and set a labour as a quote, and that information is back, and photos and documents, of course, as well. And that's in the office for someone to deal with, and that's to create the quote. Well, the quote's already created, but send it out and then confirm it.
Yeah, that's perfect.
They can message the office, live messaging. We didn't talk about that in the presentation, but they can send messages to the office. They can do inquiries like we spoke about earlier, back on job history, stock history, service history, that kind of thing. Day summaries, just viewing their timesheet, and changing activity would say, well, I'm now not traveling to this job, I'm actually on a break, or I'm traveling to depot as an example.
Mm-hmm.
And these ones here, pick, pack, and dispatch, accepting parts and goods receiving, are all around the stock process. Now, I won't go into them now. You can probably do a separate webinar in these entirely, but it's about really tracking the parts from an engineer.
So accept parts will just be in relation to a stock transfer. So if one of the things that we came across quite commonly was people taking parts off other engineers, which is in effect a stock transfer. But when it's happening in the field, then there's no visibility of it from the back office. So they don't know where those parts have gone or who's moved them onto what. So a simple stock transfer between vans, for example, is a case of accepting a part, isn't it? It's been issued to you and you're accepting that you've now got it. Yeah, you're keeping an audit process, so you know where the stock's been moving around. And then I assume that the goods receiving is the same, but it's actually when a purchase order has been raised and delivered to site or to the engineer or to a depot that he's collecting it from. Yeah, it's to basically close that PO as part of saying we've received the goods now. So you know it's there.
The pick, pack and dispatch actually is to be used in a warehouse. So if you have a reasonable sized warehouse and you want to manage the picking, packing, as the name suggests, of the parts, you can actually generate that in the back office system, send it to somebody on a mobile device, and they can use the mobile device then to manage the process of getting the parts, putting them in the right place, putting them in the right box, and then sticking them ready to be either shipped out or transferred to vans.
Exactly. Then just lastly, part of request is part of those ones. We have expenses, so travel expenses, holiday, hotels, food, accommodation, anything like that. The engineers can add expenses and you can book them against jobs if you want them to. So you can then say, well, there's a cost here, there's an expense on this job. You can see it then from a revenue cost perspective, but also you can then decide whether to charge it to the customer or not with a markup.
Yeah.
So again, it's just it's basically ensuring you have accurate costings on every job. And that's it really. We also have an F-gas part, which is very specific to sort of HVAC industry, but that's just managing bottles of gas essentially, which is, we've already done another webinar on that, which you'll be able to see on the website.
Perfect.
But that is essentially, I've talked quite a bit about that, but that is the engineer software. There's lots in there.
I remember earlier you said you'd probably do the demo in about 10 minutes.
Yeah. Got a habit of that.
Great. All right. Do you want to flick back to just to the end slide now?
Yeah. So we've gone through all these now. So hopefully I've covered all those points off, and that kind of leaves the webinar where we are now.
Right. Brilliant. Well, yeah, look, we've run over again. I don't think we've done a single webinar where we haven't run over, but I think that's good because I think it illustrates that, you know, we as individuals and as and Service Genie as well, we generally have a passion for this stuff, which might seem quite sad to some people, but I think we do get quite passionate about it, which hopefully comes across, and also is our excuse for it running longer than the original 30 minutes we often aim to try and get it into. So
we need to get a hobby.
Yeah. So listen, guys, to you individually, Age and Adam, thank you for your input. I hope people got something from it and they enjoyed it. Adam, obviously your contact details are on screen if anybody wants to get in touch with us and have what we always say is, and it's important to reiterate this, is if people just want to have a chat with us, we don't do the hard sell, do we? So if people just want to talk about their current processes and where they think they could improve, and we can maybe discuss whether we have anything that could help or not, then we'd be quite happy to do that.
Yeah, just a bit of an informal chat, really. Give me a call. I'd be happy to help or answer or ask a few questions, really.
Brilliant. Okay, well, thank you again. And no doubt we will see you guys on another webinar pretty soon, and hopefully everybody that's watched. So thanks again.
Cheers. Thank you,
guys.
Take care. See you later.
Bye.
Bye.